Hello everyone, good evening to all. I am Rakesh De from the team Voyages into the Past, and today we are extremely happy to have with us Dr. Sarbadhikary, who is the Assistant Professor of the Department of Sociology from Presidency University, Kolkata. Thank you very much, ma'am, for accepting our invitation and welcome to our Facebook live session. Dr. Sarbadhikary did her PhD in social anthropology from the University of Cambridge in 2012. She works at the interface of the anthropology of religion, anthropology of embodiment, religious studies, and philosophy. She tries to locate the body, senses, intuition, experience, imagination, and sacrality in the interstices of everyday life. In her first work, she did an intensive ethnography among different kinds of Bengal Vaishnavas, focusing on diverse experiences of religious place and sensory apprehensions of divine effect. Her first book, The Place of Devotion, Sitting and Experiencing Divinity in Bengal Vaishnavism, was published in 2015. She is passionately interested in aesthetics and music and their relation with sacred embodiment. She is currently working on the range of devotional instruments, communities involved in their making, playing, listening, meditating, and associated tradition of sonic metaphysics in Bengal. She also worked broadly in the areas of South Asia devotion, including recent works on Orishan Jagannath worldviews and tantric devotional life work. We are very much fortunate to have such an eminent person for our Facebook page. Dr. Sarbadhikary today will speak on interesting topic Shyama-Shyam, Kali-Krishna, Prithak Pranav, and remembering devotional Bengal as the Devi Pokho approaches. We are really very much eager to hear her words, especially in when Devi Pokho is about to begin. However, I would also wish to say that Dr. Sarbadhikary is currently affected in COVID, and from our entire team, we really appreciate her and also help us to continue such initiatives. So, without any further delay, I wish to hand over my microphone to Dr. Sarbadhikary. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening to all of you. Am I audible to everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. আমি প্রথমে একটু বাংলায় বলছি, তারপরে বক্তৃতা ইংরেজিতে দেব। অতীত প্রবাহের যারা উদ্যোক্তা তাদেরকে অনেক ধন্যবাদ জানাই, কারণ সব সময় তো এরকম ওপেন প্ল্যাটফর্ম পাওয়া যায় না নিজের কাজ মানুষের কাছে নিয়ে যাওয়ার জন্য, সেজন্য অনেক ধন্যবাদ। যারা এখানে এসেছেন শুনতে আর পরবর্তীকালে যারা শুনবেন, প্রত্যেককে আমার সশ্রদ্ধ প্রণাম। আর বেশি কথা না বলে শুরু করব। আজকের বক্তৃতা বলতে খারাপ লাগে, আর আলোচনাটা আমি উৎসর্গ করতে চাই প্রয়াত অধ্যাপক স্বপন চক্রবর্তীর স্মৃতিতে। শুরু করছি, পড়েই শোনাবো, এবং আপনাদের ফরম্যাটটা বোধহয় আলোচনার বক্তৃতার পরে হয়তো আপনারা প্রশ্নোত্তরের একটা সেশন রাখবেন। তখন আশা করি যদি কারোর কিছু প্রশ্ন থাকে তখন সেগুলোকে চেষ্টা করব যতদূর সম্ভব অ্যাড্রেস করতে। তো আজকের আলোচনার শিরোনাম হলো শ্যামা-শ্যাম, কালী-কৃষ্ণ, পৃথক প্রণব, রিমেম্বারিং ডিভোশনাল বেঙ্গল অ্যাজ দ্য দেবী পক্ষ অ্যাপ্রোচেস। I borrow the phrase Prithak Pranav from a compelling song by the 18th century Bengali devotional poet Ram Prasad, which foregrounds the equality between the two most significant deity figures of Bengal, Kali and Krishna. It suggests that the first ever cosmic vibration, the Om sound, which resonates in a meditator's body, echoes the erotic tremor of the first united form of divine male-female cosmic principles, which in a peculiar devotional complex of Bengal can signify Krishna's union with Kali, or their fused form as Krishna-Kali. I say peculiar since the major historiographical development about South Asian, especially Bengali devotion, almost unequivocally posits a relationship of antagonism between mother goddess worshippers or shaktas and Vishnu or Krishna devotees or Vaishnavas. Yet from murals to traditional songs, proverbs to idols in cities and villages, There is the insistent presence of fascinating deity forms, Krishna-Kali, Kali as Krishna, Krishna as Kali, etc. Through trajectories of complex archetypal imaginations, these deity forms could signify the equivalence of divinities, that is, Krishna equal to Kali, or their union, Krishna-Kali, or both. This paper outlines the basic historiographic premises about sectarian Bengal and then analyzes critical literary texts which problematize the sectarian discourse. The specific historical context hovers around the 18th century, a politically potent period of Vaishnav-Shakta encounter in Bengal. Broadly speaking, the sectarian milieu of the early modern centuries is represented as most multifaceted with mixed genealogies. Tantric influences on Vaishnavism, while Orthodox Vaishnavism reformed and consolidated itself against Tantra, a Vaishnava orthodoxy thus crystallizing around the 16th century, Vaishnavism's dominating sway over Bengal after that, a tantric revival around the 18th century with its first time public life compared to more private forms of esoteric secret worship, and in that it's trying to emulate Vaishnava devotional modes with vernacular Kalika Mongol texts similar to Vaishnava ones being written, and a general Vaishnavization or devotionalization of yogic tantric expressions. Further, the 18th century was also a flourishing period for oral poet-singers, Kobiyals, who often produced gripping compositions about Krishna appearing to Radha as Kali, Kali embodying Krishna in Vrindavan, and generally Kali-Krishna's sameness. Alongside these complex historical developments, I focus on three texts spread over a two-century period, roughly clustering around the 18th century. Radha Tantra of the mid-17th century, Ram Prasad's songs of the 18th century, and Krishna Lila Sharaboli, Brihat Krishna Lila Sharaboli of the mid-19th century, which prominently unsettle the dominant historiographical thrust about Vaishnav Shakta antipathy or antagonism. Thus, while history mostly addressed the public political lives of Bengal sects and their inter-community oppositions, literature apprehended other nuanced possibilities. Thus, history remained restricted to seeing and mirroring a political religious climate, while historical time was really situated amidst intense undercurrents of a much deeper and richer philosophical tradition, manifesting in songs, stories, rituals, popular recollections, and idols, which literary texts were able to intuit and express. Literary philosophy does not only thus reproduce, but indeed also enables history. More specifically, both historical possibilities of sectarian difference and union in Bengal are sensibly possible within an active archetypal culture of the sacred equivalence of divinities, I argue. Since even differentiation requires a minimum basis of similitude in the first place. So, an aristocratic family living in the heritage neighborhood around Kolkata's College Street still worships Krishna Kali following methods prescribed in the 17th century Radha Tantra. Further, in the heart of Kolkata's busiest burning ghat, Kalighat Shashan, a temple is dedicated to Krishna Kali. The Shashan Kali form there is of Krishna Kali. The idol holds Kali's sword or khorgo as well as Krishna's flute. As if in the final moment of a life's journey in the cremation ground, the two deities merge in an ultimate blue. The original earthen idol, discovered on the Shoshan's Ganges shores by an ascetic named Ananda Rishi, 1794 to 1849, is however worshipped in a nearby home temple where the flute is actually embedded within the sword. Oral accounts of Ananda Rishi's descendants and temple priests are ambiguous about whether typical Krishna or Kali mantras, rituals, and food offerings are maintained in the daily worship. And this ambiguity itself attests to the deity's most fascinating expressions of equivalence. There is, however, a lore that the original idol was exactly a vertical half of Krishna and Kali, with severed heads and flowers adorning Krishna's and Kali's necks respectively. But this form, devotees say, dissolved to render the current image where the flute is hidden. This narrative is telling, since most mural pictures or other idols found in Bengal are either of Kali with 6 arms, 2 holding Krishna's flute, or simply Krishna as Kali taking her form completely. Thus, the dual entity, that is halved Krishna Kali, does not usually have concrete manifestation presently. This is because, I argue, two discursive extremes dominate the Krishna-Kali question. Either a Shakta primacy which appropriates Krishna, or a Vaishnava bhakti mode subsuming tantra. The possibility of the exact half image would imply the surfacing of hidden metaphysics about Krishna-Kali sameness, which is unlikely. But the existing idol forms and popular memory are instructive enough to complicate dominant historiography. I've also heard contemporary Kobial duels in the Birbhum district with poet-singers staging as Vaishnava and Shakta adversaries, while finally singing songs about the deities actually being the same. So I try to address the urgent devotional issue about ways in which the two evening blue-skinned deities remain central to Bengal's imagination, alongside strong and persistent ideas about their equivalence. The Krishna-Kali imagination has an insistent ontology based primarily on sonic or mantra metaphysics, I argue. Such metaphysics has impacted and even constituted the image of Kali-Krishna and enabled different historical phases. Let's say of Krishna as superior to Kali, or vice versa, that is, the discourses of opposition, or the two being equivalent in powers and thus equal possibilities of mutual influence or intermixing, that is, discourses of syncretism. Many such literary imaginations were undoubtedly strengthened as responses to historical specificities of the 18th century. However, these literary responses were also echoes of a regional past with longer enduring religious sensibilities, and what Dipesh Chakraborty envisages as a primeval dark depth and return. These were evident, for instance, in early appropriations of Upanishadic and Tantric texts, and with hoary complexities shared between Tantra and devotion, and grounded on common bodily basis of understanding divinity through sacred sound. My main point of contention thus is with Malcolm MacLean, who, analyzing biographical similarities between the 16th century Vaishnava Saint Chaitanya and 18th century Kali devotee poet Ram Prasad, argued that although there were parallels in the devotional forms about their biographies, the worship content, that is, the Vaishnavas based on dualist metaphysics where God and human are essentially different, and Shaktas based on a monist philosophy where the God is seated within the human, was essentially different. I shall argue in the light of literary productions, however, that there were also forceful assertions about the sects' sameness based on theological content, not only form. The following are therefore my main points. Number one, historiography has mostly spoken about either Vaishnavas and Shaktas and Krishna and Kali as opposed figures, or cultures of syncretism in which the two come together. Two, both these premises assume the distinction of Krishna and Kali in the first place. Three, literary and material ontologies of different kinds, including songs, idols, murals, oral poetry, and theological texts, have rather had insistent references to the sameness of Krishna-Kali. Number four, such a tradition of sameness has been derived from very deep sonic philosophical understandings of both divinities as forms of Pranav or Omkar. And five, finally, these literary understandings have themselves enabled varying historical possibilities of syncretism as well as difference. The first major section, the historical representation of sects in Bengal. The relationship between Bengal's two major religious sects, that is Shaktas and Vaishnavas, has been extensively commented upon. The dominant historiographical assumption posits these as discernibly different orientations with stark perspectives, rituals, and life worlds. Recently, too, for instance, Joel Bordeaux and Patton Burchett have suggested that differences between the two sects had become explicit by the 18th century. Although these authors have contrary understandings about which sect was dominant, their common understanding of sectarian difference follows a longer discursive hypothesis. While the Tantras formed a constitutive part of Bengal's Brahmanism between 6th to 13th centuries, medieval Vaishnavism, especially during and after Chaitanya, consolidated in its egalitarian, casteless, strict vegetarian ethos and soft devotional ideals against tantric elitism, blood sacrifice, an aggressive thirsty goddess, and sexual overtones of Shiv-Kali representations, according to Bordeaux. However, during the 18th century, with the aristocrat Krishna Chandra Rai's active patronization of Kali worship, tantric fervor, as we all know, made a rejuvenated claim to Bengal's public space. Intense antagonism ensued between the sects based on political, theological, and aesthetic arguments. Shaktaism subordinated the previously dominant Vaishnavism, and even esoteric tantra became publicly relevant for the first time, with Ram Prasad composing Kali devotional songs or Kali Kirtan based on previously secret bodily themes, rendered, however, in long prevalent Vaishnava Kirtan styles. Barshad's work provides the exact historical counterpoint. It argues that two currents characterize medieval and early modern North Indian religiosity. Up to 16th century, bhakti, tantra, and yoga were enmeshed as a faith habitus, while since 15th, 16th centuries, a Sufi-inflected bhakti emerged as a distinct ontology, which clearly posited tantric yogis and mother goddess worshipping cults as inferior others. Barshad foregrounds this paradigm of difference, although recognizing Bengal's peculiar case of sectarian fusions. Barshad and Bordeaux's eventual focus on sectarian split by the 18th century is shrouded in one-sided historiographical sweeps. Let's take a look at that kind of historiography. So, S.K. Dey said, for instance, that there were strong Hindu and Buddhist decadent tantric influences on Bengal Vaishnavism, and thus reform characterized Chaitanya's and post-Chaitanya attitudes towards Tantra. Hitesh Ranjan Shanal also argued that Buddhism, Shaivism, Nath Jog, Shaktaism, and Vaishnavism formed a mixed religious environment for the lower devotional groups, while Orthodox Tantra and Vaishnavism remained disparate entities. Although he cited productive instances of Chaitanya's closest associates practicing tantric worship of Shiv, Tripura Sundari, and Krishna Radha, he eventually only furthered the discourse of sectarian dissociation. There were many historical contrarieties always, however. So, Shamjukta Gupta and Godrian mentioned the composition of Kali-Vishnu tantras during the 16th century Vaishnava revival. In these, there are interesting overlaps of deity imaginations. In the Troiloko Mohan Kabach, Krishna is mentioned as Kali's son, and Kali informs him that he shall be born as Radha's lover. The Kamdhenu Tantra discusses the syllable kling as the shared phonetic correspondence between Kali and Krishna. Kali-Krishna are further integrated within mystical geographies of practicing bodies. Despite recognizing Kali-Krishna's intersections, however, Godrian and Gupta ultimately emphasized rhetorics of difference and influence between sects. They also suggested that a religious syncretism was palpable between these different sects since 17th century. So they cited a Ram Prasad song in English, so I can't quote the Bangla original here. "O my mind, you are still deluded, you remain engrossed in Shakti's reality, but fail to discern in Hori, that is Krishna, and Hora, that is Kali, one reality." Deity correspondence was logically also extended to Vishnu and Shiva, who's Kali's consort. Thus, Dinesh Chandra Sen, cited an evocative song by Kashidas of 16th century, which ends thus. A lot of these songs, I'm going to quote the originals, not immediately provide translations, but if anybody wants, I can definitely provide them later. So this song ends with the following lines. Shankho chakra kore shobhe trishulo dombu. Similarly, an anonymous composition of the post-Chaitanya milieu narrates how an inebriated, love-maddened, Vaishnavized Shiva dances with his ghosts to the Domburu's sound and Vishnu's names. Bhange vibhor bholanath bhutgon sange nachiche, Hare Ram madhur dombur bajiche. The 16th century Shiva-Vishnu equivalence may have productively transformed into a Kali-Krishna imaginary when Shaktaism became dominant in the 18th century. However, Dinesh Chandra Sen viewed the sects as distinct, giving song instances from the post-Chaitanya period of both intersectarian conflict and influence. Similarly, S.K. Dey, in writing about Bengal's 18th century active period of Kobiyal poetry, said that both sectarian antagonism and desire to unite were evident in poetic compositions. While the sects had different literary orientations, passionate, submissive Vaishnava forms vis-a-vis a powerful yogic variety of mother goddess devotion, there also emerged common modes of emotionalism. However, rather than thinking of any ontological shared ground between the two, the author viewed these modes as historicist reactions. This was despite his acknowledgement of a novel assortment of songs on the image of Kali-Krishna. Further, he criticized and indeed wrote off a most esoteric body theological song dedicated to the goddess, which talks about body chakras sensitive to sonic mantras, by saying that the song was artificial and tedious, since its spiritual glamour takes away from historical interest. Yet it is from within these theological tenets, specifically about sonic meditation, I argue, that archetypal histories of the Krishna-Kali form derive strength. Religiosity does not deter, but rather grounds nuanced historicity. Indeed, both the forgettings and later nationalist revivals of the folk or popular textual practices, in this case compositions about Krishna-Kali, by even sensitive romantic archivists like Dinesh Chandra Sen, in their constructions of literary territoriality or Bengali nationhood, remain bhadralok in temperament, as even Varuni Bhatia observes, and unable to apprehend people's resilient faith spirits. This is primarily because classicized representations of literary practices necessarily deny the intensely corporeal basis of cultural religious lives. These bodily religiosities and faith habitus are intricately woven in several networks of Sanskrit texts like Radha Tantra, oral Kobial poetry, poet saints' devotional songs, Bengali religious texts, etc., thus animating vibrant lives of sacred practice which strongly resist sectarian differences through complex experiences of the body. So I diverge from those like Malcolm MacLean who say that, within quotes, there is a school of thought which sees Ramprasad as attempting to effect a reconciliation between Vaishnavas and Shaktas. I believe there is no evidence for this at all. When we look at the content of Ramprasad's message, we will see that it is strongly apologetic for Shaktaism, and all references to Vaishnavism are part of an assertion of an underlying monism based on the goddess as the only reality. I shall rather discuss the works which MacLean clubs as the contrary school of thought and argue that there was also always a significant discourse of Kali-Krishna equivalence realized by yogic practitioners like Ramprasad, with strong afterlives in Kobial songs, temple idols, and literary philosophy. It was mainly through sophisticated body theological practices of sonic realizations that traditional divisions between tantra or jog, that is monism, and devotion or dualism were dislodged and the deities' forms merged. S.C. Banerjee discussed the intermeshed nature of Vaishnavism and Tantra and indeed said that they may have drawn upon a common source for their respective ideas. This source, I argue, is a sonic philosophy. So Banerjee cited an 18th century song by Dasarathi Rai, dates roughly 1806 to 57, linking Krishna, Kali, the body and sound. It says that one cannot distinguish between Kali and the flute-handed Krishna. This divine power resounds as the Veena's throbbing echoes at the body's spinal base, congeals its energies in the three main nerves, concentrating in the central yogic nerve Shushumna, while the Hare Krishna Hare Ram Mahamantra reverberates through the body's 6 chakras as music. Let me quote the song. Kunjo kanone Kali, taje bongshi bonomali, sham shama bhed keno porore jeeb bhranto, bhuvan bholale goma bhuvan mohini, muladhare mohot kole bina batto binodini. Shorire shoriri jantre sushumnari troyotantre, guno bhede mohamantre tinogram sancharini. আধারে ভৈরবাকার শরদলে শ্রীরাগার মণিপুরেতে মল্লার বসন্তে হৃদ প্রকাশিনী বিশুদ্ধ হিল্লোল স্বরে কার্নাটিক আজ্ঞাপুরে তাল মান লয়ে সুরে ত্রিসপ্ত সুরভেদিনী. This song, which S.K. Dey criticized as spiritually abstruse and historically irrelevant, is rather a critical vantage point from which to understand persistent literary thematics about Krishna Kali, superseding historical claims of unequivocal sectarian identities in Bengal. I'll just take a 30-second break and go on to the next major section on literary representations of Kali-Krishna devotion in Bengal. A very old metaphysical tradition connects Kali, Krishna, and even Shiva through understandings of sound theology embodied in bodily practice. A very important and interesting book called Shakta-Vaishnava Milan by Sukumar Ranjan Dotto, published in 1973, frontally analyzed such possibilities of experiencing divine equivalence through sound yoga. Sonic yogic practices are derived directly from direct tantras and Upanishads. For instance, the Kaushitaki Upanishad, Chandogya Upanishad, the Mahabharata, Netra Tantra, Vigyan Bhairav Tantra, Kubjika Mata Tantra, Sharada Tilak Tantra, etc. These texts explain, obviously these texts have very important, significant and detailed perspectives on the question of sound in the body, but here I'm lumping them together to give an essential idea. These texts explain that the first expression of cosmic creation produced through universal male-female energy union is a sonic vibration, which is uncaused or unstruck, commonly understood as the anahata nad, the anahata, that is the unstruck sound, and resounds as the hum of Om or Pranav. This macrocosmic echo can also be experienced by yogic tantric practitioners as indistinguishable from, they say, 21,600 microcosmic daily breaths intermeshed with the Hare Krishna Hare Ram Mahamantra, or the Hangsha Mantra as they call it. This realization is achieved through controlled breathing when the male and female cosmic energies present in every body, traversing through two main spinal nerves, Ida and Pingala, are united and pulled up via the central yogic nerve, Shushumna. Then Pranav or Omkar is directly apprehended. The coiled serpentine feminine energy, Kundalini or Kali, is aroused at the spinal base, travels up towards the cranium, which is the seat of, alternately represented as the seat of Shiva or Krishna, to unite in eternal sexual embrace. And this intensity reverberates as the unstruck sound throughout the adept's body. Further, these acoustic vibrations reveal thus the indistinguishability of female-male energies, or Kali, or Krishna, or Shiva, experienced as variations, Prithak, of Pranav within the body itself. Moreover, both Vaishnava and Shakta practitioners arrive at the same theological comprehension. While it may seem that these principles are essentially yogic, one would be surprised to learn that these tantric thematics are equally woven within primal classical Vaishnava texts like the Bhagavad Puran itself. Dotto borrows from the Mundamala, Gautamiya, Baroda Tantra, Kali-Vilas Tantra, Skanda Upanishad, etc. to clarify these sonic positions. He says that Shiva or Horo and Krishna or Hori have in many texts been equated. In others, Vishnu's 10 incarnations have been likened to the goddess's 10 forms. There are ritual similarities in Tantric and Vaishnava initiation and esoteric equivalences in deity mantra phonemes. Mundamala Tantra refers to Kali garlanded by 50 skulls signifying the 50 Sanskrit alphabets, very famously written about by John Woodruff, while the goddess's body stands as the direct embodiment of Omkar. Krishna and his seed mantra too are Om's materialized forms. And in the Bhagavad Gita, some of us might know, Krishna declares himself literally as Omkar. Krishna Kali thus corresponding apprehensions of divine sound and cosmic existence. The Kali-Vilas Tantra says that Radha and Krishna emanated from Kali's sonic body. Kali informs Krishna that Radha as a form of Tripura Sundari and Kundalini's buzz would be born from her and be found in Krishna's seed sound or Kambij mantra. These imaginations are precisely echoed in the Vaishnav's very revered text Radha Tantra, where Krishna performs Kali worship and tantric sexual rituals to attain liberation. The Baroda Tantra discusses the phonic similarity of Haro and Hori, where Hor refers to Shiva, Ra to the goddess, E to her illusory powers, and the nasal after sound Mo or Nad Bindu, her sonic creative power. Here, Hori can mean both Krishna and Shiva, Hara, both Radha and Kali, and Nad or Pranav or Om holding these forms together. Again, the Skanda Upanishad describes Krishna or Hori and Shiv or Haro as each other's hearts, which very popularly in Bengali we have, sort of inherited as the proverb Hori Harakta. And the Sheta-Shakta Upanishad says that Kali can take both male and female forms. The deity's equivalence especially comes across through the Kambij mantra, common to Krishna and Kali. Following the Bhuddhamor, Baroda Tantra, Rudrajamal Tantra, etc., Datta provides a critical analysis of each mantric phoneme such that different forms like Guccha Kali, Dokina Kali, Gopal, Vishnu, Krishna attain correspondence, mantric correspondence. Further, the essential power of these mantras is present in the adept's own bodily spinal base or Muladhara as Kundalini's force. And as the Shiv Samhita says, in the lightning-like four-petal lotus chakra within which the primal sound seed rests. In these sonic yogic discourses of embodied realizations, all Vaishnava and Shakta pilgrimages are said to be simultaneously experienced in the body through Kali's or Krishna's identity or sameness. Datta cites a number of orally transmitted songs attesting these realizations. So, Govinda Chaudhary, 19th century poet, writes, আজ যেমন গোবিন্দের কাছে দুর্গা রূপে এসেছে, কাল দেখবে রাধা রূপে শ্যামের বামে বসেছে. The famous Kamalakanto, Shakta poet of the 18th century, sings, হয়ে এলো কেশি করে লয়ে অসি দনুজ তনয় করে সভয় কভু ব্রজপুরে আসি বাজায় বাঁশি ব্রজাঙ্গনার মন ভরিয়ে লয়. Similarly, Ramlal Das Datta, 19th century poet, says, অভেদ ভাবরে মন কালা আর কালী মোহন মুরলীধারী চতুর্ভুজ মুন্ডমালী কালী কি কালা বলিলে কাল কালে ছয় না কোনো কালে কালের কর্ত্রী কালী সেই কালা কালা আমার মা কালী ব্রহ্মা বিষ্ণু শিব রাম দুর্গা কালী রাধা শ্যাম সবই একই সব একের বলে সবাই বলি. These songs vibrantly animate Bengal's literary scene and complicate the historical premises of sectarian difference. The second major text I discussed before moving on to Ramprasad's songs is Radha Tantra, whose author is anonymous. This text is especially significant since it offers a radical reinterpretation of the immensely popular devotional Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We know, of course, that these very, very popular, very powerful Mahamantra, and the text completely overturned its Vaishnava meaning. This Mahamantra was propagated as a Vaishnava chant by Sri Chaitanya. So its supra-sectarian, deity-fusing quality explained by Radha Tantra makes it particularly potent for alternative cultural imaginations. The Radha Tantra was composed around 1635. Also known as Vasudev Rahasya, it is a tantric text with 1745 verses spread over 37 chapters. It reinterprets the popular Radha Krishna story in such a way that Mansbrew, who has produced the first annotated translation of the text, several manuscripts, argues that it is not a Vaishnava text but a Shakta one. During the 17th century, Vaishnava texts were being translated copiously in Bengali from Sanskrit and often describing Shaktas as dangerous, sexually licentious, bloodthirsty, and immoral. In this milieu, Bruce argues the Radha Tantra was written reactively to co-opt Vaishnava thought and deities into Shaktaism to render Vaishnavism as a version of Shakta doctrine. Thus, although citing Ramakanta Chakraborty about popular authors mixing Vaishnava and Shakta thematics well up to the 19th century, Brew ultimately deems the Radha Tantra a Shakta text. He borrows conceptually from Godwin and Gupta, who characterized Radha Tantra as a Vaishnava Tantra, better a Kali-Vishnu Tantra, which were later tantric developments in which Shaktaism incorporated Vaishnavism. On the other hand, S.C. Banerjee took the opposite view and said about Radha Tantra that Vaishnavas had to write tantras on their own cult in order to attract popular support. However, beyond the simplifying historicist lens of either Vaishnava or Shakta appropriations of Radha Tantra, I argue that the text needs to be understood as typifying a peculiar Bengali religious mode where sects are creatively interlaced. Its historical value must be appreciated as established through its theological worth. Indeed, a historical debate itself sheds light on this point. So, Dinesh Chandra Sen opined that the Radha Tantra is a pre-Chaitanya text, which indeed would imply that it was unaffected by either Bengal's Vaishnava or Shakta Vaishnava historicity. Mansfield resolved this debate by arguing that there was indeed another Radha Tantra of the 15th century, a Shoibo text, no manuscripts of which have survived. In it, Shiv appears as Ardhanarishwar, or the united form of cosmic male and female principles, Purusha and Prakriti. This text definitely predated Shakta or Vaishnava revivals, co-options, and responses to one another. I argue that the 15th century and 17th century Radha Tantras may together be seen, however, as a single theoretical frame, constituents of a discursive web consolidating a religious ontology specific to Bengal, which interfaces among Shaivism, Shaktoism, and Vaishnavism based on universal male-female sexualized interchangeable relations between Shiv Kali, Krishna Radha, Krishna Kali, and even Vishnu Shiv. This is what may have led Dinesh Chandra Sen to conflate the earlier and later Radha Tantras, I feel. In a fascinating move, therefore, the Radha Tantra, although characterized as a Shakta text by Mansfield, becomes an authority on the meaning of the ostensibly Vaishnava Hare Krishna mantra. Further, Mansfield himself says that it has become a blueprint for the worship of a combined form of Kali-Krishna. So, what happens in the text? Krishna approached Shiv to understand the method of liberation. Shiv gave him the goddess Tripura's Srividya mantra. Whose goddess Tripura? She is the buzzing goddess of sound and knowledge, embodying all of Shiv's powers. The Srividya mantra did not work. Then he asked Krishna to recite Vishnu's Hare Krishna mantra, understanding its true meaning, and then engage in kulachar, which is specified sexual rituals. These would prepare Krishna for the Srividya mantra and the understanding of the 4 garlands on Tripura's neck as containing 50 matrika sounds of the Hindu sonic universe. These 50 phonemes, congealed as Om, constitute universal vibrational possibility and create, maintain, and destroy the cosmos at every instant. The Radha Tantra narrative progresses further. Tripura appears before Krishna and, addressing him as her son, introduces him to Kola ritual and asks him to carry them out with one of her own sound or mantric manifestations, who's Radha. So Krishna attained mantra perfection by reciting it over 7 parts of Radha's body. He then surrenders to Radha, who teaches him how to worship Shiva and Katyayani, the value of sexual fluids, and they together recite Mahakali's Vidya mantra. By Tripura Sundari's powers, Mahavishnu takes many forms, including of Krishna's, and Krishna's body itself is understood in the text as Kali's embodiment, his self as Mahavishnu's, and his mind as Rudra or Shiva's. However, Radha as Poddini, that is a part of Kali, and Krishna as Vishnu then engage in ritual sex. Therefore, Krishna himself is the perfect form of Kali, Vishnu, Shiva together, and further the text directly talks of Kali-Vishnu sexual union. This sexual union, however, is Kali's lila or play with herself, Krishna and Radha both being parts of her own embodied self. The author of Radha Tantra also in fact calls it the true Vaishnava Bhagavat, a theological claim not made by other texts. However, interpreting Bhag as the vagina and the Vaishnava text as the most esoteric form of tantric realization. Radha Tantra's most critical significance of fused deity imaginations is evident in its interpretation of the Hare Krishna mantra. The text mentions the sage of the 16 names as Vasudev, divinity as Tripura, and goal as perfection in Mahavidya, or the knowledge of the goddess. Repetition of these name sounds prepares the adept for sexual rituals of Tantra. I'm not going into the details of how each and every phoneme, like ha, re, kra, sh, no, all of these are interpreted, but together they add up to the two central premises of the equivalence of Kali, Shiva, and Krishna, and Kali-Krishna sexual union. Thus, we have in the Radha Tantra principle of deity fusion, Shiva Kali, Krishna Radha, Krishna Kali, etc. This union is experienced through sonic meditation by practitioners. While the Radha Tantra espouses a specialized theology, its imaginations are part of and influence a discursive milieu of religious sensibilities which far supersede the historicity of sectarian textual appropriations. These discourses blending Krishna, Kali, Shiva also remain sedimented in other kinds of devotional texts and popular practices, embodying a strong literary ontology over several centuries. I now turn to very popular devotional songs by Ram Prasad, which consolidate the imagination of Krishna Kali further. Ram Prasad Sen. Bengal's Shakta-predominant period, with the prominence of vernacular literature, the flair of a peculiar form of Krishna Kali imagination, and the domineering charisma of a figure which expressed these cultural dispositions, came together in the mid-18th century devotee poet Ram Prasad Sen. He was associated with Raja Krishna Chandra's court in Krishnanagar, Nadia, and the two became major symbols of Shakta revival and consolidation, Shakta consolidation for the later centuries in Bengal. Malcolm MacLean argues that Ram Prasad was historically important in propelling an age of Shakta devotion in place of an earlier Vaishnava supremacy. This Shakta form, which blended Puranic and popular ideas of the goddess, dominated through the 19th century age of popular tantric Shaktaism and continued well into the 20th century. Second, according to him, although this religious preponderance was shaped through formal modeling of Ram Prasad's life and person on Chaitanya's, calling him a Shakta Chaitanya, the content of Shakta and Vaishnava devotion were essentially different. This content difference is posited by him on grounds of Ram Prasad's overload tantric side, which indeed is the dominant strain in his works. Malcolm MacLean feels that Ram Prasad's tantric side was overlooked. I argue, however, that it is precisely Ram Prasad's tantricity on the contrary, which rather than making his devotion divorced from Vaishnava epistemology and experience, does not actually allow any strict sectarian divide. Tantra is not only about power-lusty deities and blood sacrificial rituals opposed to soft Vaishnavism. Tantric understandings of sound is also evident in the Radha Tantra, fuse Shakta and Vaishnava ontologies. Ram Prasad's tantric goddess is a universal power present both in the cosmos and inside the body. Following Shankar philosophical principles, she is both Purush and Prakriti. At the base of the adept's spinal cord in the Muladhara chakra, the goddess is present as a 3.5 times looped serpent, the Kundalini Shakti, buzzing as Om, who rises up with mantric utterances towards the cranium chakra Sahasrar, where pure consciousness resides as Shiva, and the entire body throbs with sacred sound. It seems from some of Ram Prasad's compositions, MacLean says that he is forwarding theistic devotion, similar to Vaishnava religiosity, but argues that this is explicable from within tantric metaphysics, where, alongside esoteric yogic discipline, idol worship is permitted. However, the nature of this worship is different from Vaishnava devotion, Shakti Bhakti versus simple Bhakti. Bengal Vaishnava Bhakti is ostensibly Shogun, or devotion towards divinity with form, the opposite of which is Nirgun religiosity. Well, not really an opposite, but that's how the historiography generally posits Nirgun Bhakti as an opposition to Shogun Bhakti, which is apprehension of a formless sacred realized through bodily practices. However, Shakti Bhakti is unique since it uses dualist means but supersedes it towards understandings of a unified formless state of male-female energy fusion. The 19th century poet and Ram Prasad biographer, Ishwar Chandra Gupta, says that in Ram Prasad's poetry, the meaning of bhakti, emotion, combines effortlessly with tantric knowledge of the formless, Prakriti and Purush together as Kali. I argue that MacLean, in focusing exclusively on radical devotional difference, does not fully acknowledge the ontology of Ramprasad's literary thrust, which actually complicates sectarian modes. Through his tantric appreciation of meditative sacrality, he offers a vision of the divine, merging male and female aspects of the body with the equal possibility of Kali-Krishna imagination rising as Omkar within the body itself. While this unitary imagination in Ramprasad may be read as a powerful Kali, fusing all possible forms of divinity, it is equally, I argue, a Nirgun sounding ontology which embodies as Kali, Krishna, Shiva, depending on the practitioner's orientation. In that sense, Krishna too, like Kali, may be interpreted as fusing divinities, or better, as a principle embodying different potential forms. Similar points about deity equivalence are made by Sukumar Ranjan Datta and Satyanarayan Bhattacharya, which MacLean critiques as the contrary school of thought. While using Bhattacharya's collection of Ramprasad songs, I suggest that MacLean omits the analysis of precisely those narratives which complicate the sectarian problematic. So I present below portions of few of most evocative Ramprasad songs which address this Krishna-Kali-Shiva composite and the singular importance of mantric meditation in this realization. Like the Radha Tantra, the first song I discuss here talks about the sonic ability of the Hare Krishna mantra to fuse Vaishnava and Shakta worldviews, and talks about how the 50 Matrika sounds unite the human body with the cosmos. মন বলি ভজ কালী ইচ্ছা হয় তোর যে আচারে গুরুদত্ত মহামন্ত্র দিবানিশি জপ করে যত শোনো এই কর্ণপুটে সবই মায়ের মন্ত্র বটে তারা পঞ্চশত বর্ণময়ী বর্ণে 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 নাম ধরে. The next song, mentioned in his biography as a favorite of the famous 19th century Kali devotee and saint Krishna, requests Kali to take up her earlier Krishna form. The past tense of the song is very telling, implying that one of Nirgun Kali's epochal forms was Krishna. This tense evocation is not about historical precedence of Vaishnavism having been replaced by Shaktaism later, but rather the representation of a formless, fused divinity embodying different temporal formations, sometimes as the female energy Kali, who is potentially also the male energy Krishna. I'll read out the song. যশোদা নাচাতো গো মা বলে নীলমণি সেরূপ লোকালে কোথা করালো বদনী একবার নাচবো শ্যামা অসি ফেলে বাঁশি লয়ে মুন্ডমালা ফেলে বনমালা লয়ে তোর শিব বলরাম হোক তেমনি তেমনি করে নাচবো শ্যামা যে রূপে ব্রজ মাঝে নেচেছিলি একবার বাজাগো মা তোর মোহন বেনু যে বেনু রবে গোপীর মন ভুলাতিস যে বেনু রবে ধেনু ফিরাতিস যে বেনু রবে যমুনা উজান বয় আবার তাত হইয়া তাতা থইয়া থইয়া বাজত নুপুর ধ্বনি শুনতে পেয়ে আসত ধেয়ে যত ব্রজের রমণী. This mood influenced many poetic compositions in the post-Ramprasad milieu. For instance, one song by the Kobiyal Nobai Moira, beginning with Hridoy Rash Mundire Darao Go Matri Bhango Hoye. In this song, towards the end, the poet refers to transformations of Kala, that's Krishna, and Kali as forms of the same black moon. In a similar mood, Ramprasad writes, কালী ব্রহ্মময়ী গো বেদাগম পুরাণে করিলাম কত খোঁজ তলাশি মহাকালী কৃষ্ণ শিব রাম সকলই আমার এলোকেশী শিব রূপে ধরো শিঙা কৃষ্ণ রূপে ধরো বাঁশি উমা রাম রূপে ধরো ধনু কালী রূপে করে অসি. The fourth song that I discuss here laments the futility of all worship unless Krishna, Kali and Shiva are realized as one. ও মন তোর ভ্রম গেল না পেয়ে শক্তি তত্ত্ব হলিমত্ত হরিহর তোর এক হলো না বৃন্দাবন আর কাশী ধামের মূল কথা মনে বোঝো না কেবল ভবচক্রে বেড়াও ঘুরে করে আত্মপ্রচারণা. কেবল ভবচক্রে বেড়াও ঘুরে করে আত্মপ্রতারণা। অসি বাঁশির মর্ম বুঝে তোমার কর্ম করা আর হলো না। অসি বাঁশির মর্ম বুঝে তোমার কর্ম করা আর হলো না। প্রসাদ বলে গন্ডগোলে এ যে কপট উপাসনা। তুমি শ্যাম শ্যামাকে প্রভেদ করো, চক্ষু থাকতে হলে কানা। The best, in my opinion, the best Ram Prasad song, which forcefully talks about the universal cosmic sound vibration, Pranav or Om itself becoming male and female, Krishna and Kali or Radha, is cited below. I'll just discuss it. Here, historicity is vehemently overridden. Both epochal times of the goddess and Krishna are presented simultaneously in the past tense, not implying the past of any given historical period, therefore, but rather signifying the always present ontological possibilities of Pranav or primary sound taking on different aspects of divine manifestations. Further, these sacred forms are thus referred to as time's dimensions, unbound by linear history. It is instructive that in the tantras, the moon chakra, located in the middle of the eyebrows, is conceptualized as a subtle state of vibration or sound which merges male-female bodily energies. This also draws relations between this song and the previously cited Nobai Moira 1, where Krishna and Kali are equivalent aspects of the black moon. Ram Prasad and other poet singers, therefore, characterizing and embodying a long and deep enduring cultural tradition, compose these songs as sincere meditative realizations merging Krishna Kali rather than as Shakta responses to Vaishnava histories. Further, Ram Prasad himself hints that this devotional materiality and philosophical insight is a matter of difficult cultivation, apprehended only by few. So I argue historical vision has mostly been unable to appreciate the ontological nuances of Ram Prasad's and other devotee poets' religious habitus and life world. I'm citing this song, very popular song from memory. Kali Holima Rash Bihari. নটবর বেশে বৃন্দাবনে পৃথক প্রণব নানা লীলা তব কে বুঝে কথা ভীষণ ভারী। নিজ তনু আধা গুণবতী রাধা আপনি পুরুষ আপনি নারী। ছিল ঘন ঘন হাস ত্রিভুবন ত্রাস মৃদু হাস ভুলে ব্রজকুমারী। শোণিত সাগরে নেচেছিলে শ্যামা মা মাগো ব্রহ্মময়ী মাগো তুমি এ দেখি তব যমুনা বাড়ি। বুঝেছি জননী মনে বিচারি মহাকাল কালো শ্যাম শ্যামা তনু একই সকল বুঝিতে নারী। I'll just repeat this song once more because this, in a sense, is a crux of a lot of things I've been trying to say. কালী হলিমা রাস বিহারী নটবর বেশে বৃন্দাবনে পৃথক প্রণব নানা লীলা তব কে বুঝে এ কথা ভীষণ ভারী। নিজ তনু আধা গুণবতী রাধা আপনি পুরুষ আপনি নারী। ছিল ঘন ঘন হাস ত্রিভুবন ত্রাস মৃদু হাস ভুলে ব্রজকুমারী। শোণিত সাগরে নেচেছিলে শ্যামা মা মাগো ব্রহ্মময়ী মাগো তুমি এ দেখি তব যমুনা বাড়ি। বুঝেছি জননী মনে বিচারি মহাকাল কালো শ্যাম শ্যামা তনু একই সকল বুঝিতে নারী। I argue, therefore, that poetic texts produced by Ram Prasad constitute a part of a vibrant discursive tradition which actively evades historicist concerns of sectarian divisions and is based rather on tantric metaphysical realizations of body theology and sound meditation, creatively implying the equivalence of Krishna, Kali, and Shiva. For popular listeners unaware of these historical complexities especially, the aesthetic environment these songs generate precisely through their powerful lyrics and oral mysticism speaks of a deity equation, a culture in which the Krishna-Kali form is perfectly thinkable and realizable in texts and worship. The final text I discussed was produced in the mid-19th century, is extremely popular in rural Bengal, and has nuanced narratives exploring the sameness of Krishna and Kali, as also Hori, that is Krishna, and Horo, or Shiva. The text is called Brihot Krishna Lila Sharaboli. I encountered this text for the first time during fieldwork with old families of Kobials in an interior village of Bengal's Murshidabad district. They make extensive use of the text during evening discussions and formal sermons by Kobial gurus. The Brihad Krishna Lila Sharaboli, composed by Radha Madhav Ghosh in the mid-19th century, is a Bengali verse form rendition of the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Puran, the famous section containing details of Krishna's life story. What makes the text distinctive is its combination of Bhagavad's classical narrative with episodes from other Puranas, popular lore, and innumerable oral recountings of the Krishna myth. It is fascinating that classical Vaishnava tenets, therefore, themselves make way for Krishna-Kali correspondences. This is a very popular story enacted in popular stage theatre, orally recollected by a lot of people, and a lot of you may be familiar with this narrative. So once Radha arranged a clandestine meeting with Krishna on Jamuna's riverbanks on the pretext of performing Katyayani Puja. Radha's jealous mother-in-law and sister-in-law discovered the couple in the forest bowers and rushed to alert Radha's husband, Ayan Ghosh. Ayan was infuriated and swiftly went with arms to kill Radha. Radha became aware of his arrival and pleaded with Krishna for help. Ayan was a devout Kali worshipper, and Krishna knew that becoming Kali, that is, becoming himself, would reinstate Ayan's faith. In a captivating gesture, Krishna tells Radha that it is her powers which can make Krishna work. So Radha extends her Kali powers to him. He too becomes Kali, stands before Radha, and she worships her. In other words, through Kali's or Krishna's powers shared between the lovers, embodied and exchanged by them, Kali worships herself. Radha worships Krishna. It implies a play by the divine self with him or herself. Shyam then embodies the ferocious, beautiful Shyama. The text then describes the goddess, her nude body, sharp sword, skull necklace, bloody tongue, wild hair, echoing anklets, etc., in its characteristic redolent style. Radha worshipped Kali with intense sincerity. Ayan was stimulated with devotion and prayed to her in immaculate verse, alluding to her external powers as well as manifestation within the body's Kundalini Shakti. He asked for Radha's forgiveness and implored her to keep worshipping Shyama, who we now know, of course, is Bhagavat's Shyam. This story is very popular, retold in dramas, rural fairs, kirtan performances, etc. However, rather than implying simply a divine camouflage of Krishna becoming Kali, the complex nuances of the lore suggest that Krishna is Kali. Ingrained in popular imagination is thus the idea of deity identity, also represented in a picture in the text, which is an exact half of Krishna Kali, a rare pictorial evidence rather than the more common depiction of Krishna as Kali standing before Radha. One may argue that this particular reading of the Bhagavad is a tantric or Shakta one, where Krishna Radha are parts of Kali's truth. In a post-Radha Tantra and Ramprasad age of long 18th century textual tradition, especially one which interpolates orality and intuitive narratives with classics, the seeping of a language of Krishna as Kali into an ostensibly Vaishnava text seems plausible. However, the Radha Tantra reading itself is not an unequivocally Shakta one, I have argued, but rather is synchronous with the interpretation enabled by the Vaishnava Bhagavad itself. Shakta Vaishnava thematics thus interweave in the tightest possible spin. Kali as Krishna and Krishna as Kali give way to Krishna equal to Kali, and even the union of Krishna-Kali. It is therefore difficult and indeed unnecessary to establish whether this narrative telling in the Brihad Krishna Lila Sharaboli is Vaishnava or Shakta. Bengal around the 18th century had a strong culture, evident in oral recollections and critical texts, of sacred ontology, which equated divine figures, complicating overarching historical ideas of sectarian appropriations. So Kali becoming Krishna, Krishna becoming Kali, Krishna and Shiva sharing the same soul, Kali and Shiva embodying each other's energies, Krishna and Kali's sexual union, and thus the erotic play of the divine with himself or herself, and many such theological formulations animate texts. Essentially, though, they conjure a force of Krishna equal to Kali, equal to Shiva. David Kinsley had a strong thesis in this regard. He first established the different aspects of Krishna and Kali and concluded on a note of philosophical sameness, which reflects the Hindu devotional underground, according to him. He quoted Arthur Avalon describing Kali, quote, now taking up the flute instead of the sword, or again seizing the sword instead of the flute, or again at times making both the sword and the flute into one in her hand, unquote. Kinsley explained the deities' similarity in terms of their emanation from what he called the primordial indigenous soil of India and their essentially untamed quality, which affords transcendence. However, he viewed the deities' radical otherness as essentially unspecified and embodying an unrefined primordial being. I contend, however, that Krishna Kali's sameness is actually most well defined and metaphysically refined, and over several centuries embodied by a devotional people. This philosophy, understood, expressed, and analyzed by literary cultures, has the capacity to both facilitate historical forms of sectarian dissociation, association, syncretism, hostility, etc., as also transcend historicity through apprehensions of ontological or theological equivalence among Krishna, Shiva, and Kali. Thank you. That would be all. As I said, if anybody wants any translation of a particular text, I'd be happy to provide that for you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful lecture, ma'am. Rakesh is having some network issues, so I would be concluding. If you guys have any questions to the audience, so you can ask right now. Aditya, please show the question. Okay. It is from Ridhija Bhawal. Does the concept of Krishna Kali represent the concept of gender feudalism, or does it transcend gender altogether?
Before I answer, or rather try to answer that question, Ridhija, would you introduce yourself if possible, please?
Ma'am, actually, these are the questions we are taking from the comment sections of Facebook. So, Ridhija is one of our team member. She is studying in presidency, but I don't know whether I would be able to, introduce all the comments which are coming.
So, okay, all right. Thank you for your question, Ridhija. I'll give it a very short answer. I don't know if it was evident in the way I tried to present the material, but I would think that it does. I'd go with the second part of your question, which is that I would think that conceptions of Krishna Kali transcend the questions of gender. To be a little more precise, and these matters require very long discussions, but I'll try to be very brief about, for the purposes here, which is that when we think of the Nirgun form congealing into a Shogun form, that Nirgun form may be of Kali or Krishna, but in the congealed form they come together as the male and the female buzzing together. This Nirgun form literally is without property. And if we think of gender as a property, then the essential idea here would wish to evade questions of gender. I hope that answers the question in some way.
Aditya, can we have the next question? This is Dishani Roy. Grateful for the lecture, ma'am. Since you made reference to the moon, I was just wondering if lunar calendar and corresponding days of Kali or Krishna worship, that is the Amavasya and Purnima respectively, is mere coincidence.
difficult question, Dishani. I have to admit that I do not know the answer to this question. I stress on answer because I'm wondering whether it does have an answer. I will surely think about it, read about it if I have not encountered the question, the concept in this way. However, let me also take this opportunity to say that the idea of Kala, right? So the term Kali comes from the term, we can think of the dhatu Kal as informing both terms, Kala and Kali. And Kala, as we know, is about parts of the moon. So the unit of measurement of Kala would be 1/16. So 16 parts coming together would make the full moon. So in some sense, the new moon and the full moon would be very critical in imaginations are very important in tantric imaginaries, that's for sure. But how precisely they connect to the idea of Kali and Krishna is to be thought about. The Ardhachandra again is a very important marker for Nadbindu, for Omkar. As you know, Shiv also has the Ardhachandra. He carries the Ardhachandra with him. But exactly like I said, how the idea of Purnima and Amavasya might figure onto questions of the Krishna form and the Kali form, the Krishna Pakhu, the Shukla Pakhu either, is something I will have to think a little more about. But yes, as I said, the form of so more commonly known things are, for instance, that the form of Tripura Sundari is about 16 parts of the Kala coming together, right? Or the loss of the moon, the new moon, is also about the fullest form of Kala in a different way, right? Which is the form of Kali, right? But how Krishna will figure with this, thank you very much. You're leaving me with that thought. I'll just think a little more about it if I can, or if I can get access to material about it. I'll surely get back to you with it.
Thank you so much for such a beautiful question. This was a nice question. Okay, there is another question. It is from Chargram Sharma. Sorry, could you please name the author who has written an analysis of Radha Tantra, arguing that it's not a Vaishnava text?
First of all, I'm not sure whether this is the Sargam I know. The Sargam I taught some years back. If it is, thank you for coming, Sargam. It's very nice to hear from you. So the author I mentioned here was Man's Brew. The chat here does not permit me to write to you. Man's Brew, Mansbro, who argues that it is not a Vaishnava text at all. Like I was trying to suggest, I will not say that's a polemical argument. He is coming to that conclusion because it's such a it's such a tantric overreading of the text. However, I would suggest very strongly that it is not important to try and bracket the text as a sectarian one. I tried to sort of lay out for you points of debate where some would think of it as a Shakta text, some would think of it as a Vaishnava text, some would get confused about the historical datings, about the 15th century and the 17th century text. And I'm trying to suggest that these murky possibilities are because the text affords a number of possible supra-sectarian readings.
Next question. Another question from Sargam. Sargam, this is with regard to your comments on how historiography is done and how literary traditions require a different order / manner / method. of engagement, it would be wonderful to hear some more of your thoughts on this.
Thank you again, Sargon. That's again a very complex question. I'll just try and make one point here, a point that I've tried to build on with respect to this argument here, but also a point that I'd like to try and cultivate through future works that I'm hopefully able to do, which is that I believe that literary ontology holds the possibility to nestle history as well as surpass history. So history is a possibility enabled by literature rather than the other way around. Literature, and the other point that I wish to think about is how literature actually has greater semblance with regional philosophy, with the culture's philosophy. It in its broad brush imagination, it is able much more confidently and fearlessly to sort of trespass philosophical boundaries and therefore hold certain essential notions of cultural thought. In that, literature has the possibility, the capacity to have a greater life, a longevity. That longevity, I believe, has, sort of enables history and enables different kinds of historical or temporal phases, rather than literature only always reflecting history. So that's actually the kind of subterranean, I would think, theoretical understanding that has been guiding my paper here, and some general thoughts, other thoughts as well.
Thank you, ma'am. That's an interesting one. Aditya, do you have here? Sujata Chakraborty, this is a question from Sujata Chakraborty. Amazing lecture, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, it's an honor to ask you a question. My question is there any connection of Kundalini Yoga with Shakti Sadhana or Tantra Shastra? Is there any temple architecture in Bengal that has a mixture of Vaishnavism and Shakta religion?
So the first question, is there a connection of Kundalini Yoga with Shakti Sadhana or Tantra Shastra? Yes. Simple answer, yes. Again, these are very long issues, so I can't really go into detail here. Not that I'm even able to go into too much detail, but yes, definitely there is a relationship. Is there any temple architecture that has a mixture of Vaishnavism and Shakta religion? That's a good question. I'm not being able to think of very definite answers, but one temple that I am particularly reminded of in Hooghly, the Hongsheshwari temple surely is interesting, but the other temple, just give me a second, where the Rotonti Kali Pujo is performed. Not being able to, just give me 1 second. I'm not being able to remember. Mohanath temple, that's the one. Yes, Mohanath temple. Mohanath is an interesting place not because of the temple architecture so much, but because of the temple rituals. So it is a Kali temple. The name is telling, Mohanath. Omkar is Nad Tattva is about Omkar. So Mohanath temple is a Kali temple, but it has strong traditions of Vaishnava worship as well. So that is a temple I am being able to remember offhand. Yes. But again, thank you for the questions, because I is it Brahmomoyi Kali temple? It's the Mahanath Kali temple. I don't know if it's also called Brahmomoyi. That's from the chat box. But thank you for the questions, because in case I'm able to remember other details later, and it often happens, some answers come back later, not immediately, then I'm surely going to get back to all of you. I'm sure that they have some. I mean,
Yes,
this is
yes.
recorded. So,
You can also type in that Facebook chat section. Like this video will be there. So if
okay.
you get back to this question, if
Sure,
you
sure,
want to
sure.
answer it, you can
Yes.
do that.
Yes. And just another thing, Shujata, there is no honor in asking questions. It's an honor to receive questions, because it at least means that there is something I'm able to, any author or any reader is able to communicate. So, thank you for the question.
Okay, ma'am. Probably this was the last question. So thank you so much. Thank you for accepting our request at such an hour. Like you were not well and still you did give such a beautiful and interesting lecture. Thank you so much from our side. We are grateful. And thank you so much to our audiences for seeing this lecture and keep questioning whenever you feel interested in any topic. Do write us on what issues you want further lectures. Keep connected with us from our YouTube and Facebook and Instagram pages, and keep listening to Voices into the Past. Thank you.
Srija, can I take 1 second there, please? Am I audible?
Yes,
Can you
yes,
hear
yes.
me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm being told that there are other questions on Facebook. Is that correct?
Actually, the person who is handling the technical, he is not showing anywhere.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, okay.
Oh,
Doesn't matter.
this
And
was probably the question.
thank you for the organizing this. Yes, it would have been better had I felt a little physically better. My brain is a little fuzzy there. But as I said, the title says that as Devi Pokko approaches. So had I done it too much later, then it would lose its relevance. So thank you very much.